Hello and welcome to the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. We bring you interviews from people who have conquered the trickiest of health challenges using the Functional Diagnostic Nutrition philosophy and similar healing modalities. You're going to hear from experts who have been through the ringer with their health issues and yet managed to come out on the other side. You can always visit us at functionaldiagnosticnutrition.com, but for now, here is today's episode. All right. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. My name is Evan Transu, aka Detective Ev, and I will be your host for today's show, episode number 432 of the Health Detective Podcast. Got a little bit of a different background today. We are not in Austin, Texas yet. For those that listen to the podcast regularly, we're actually on the road right now. We're currently in Richmond, Virginia, and then it's so funny because my wife and I are actually swapping out the same spots. She was just on a call before this. I got the podcast afterwards. It's a nice background. We try to plan this when we're doing our Airbnbs. I will be in PA for a little bit, and then we will have that new setup in Austin, Texas. Cannot wait for it. And if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, we're heading down there. We'll be doing at least one in-person podcast a month and posting it to you guys on our YouTube channel here. So please make sure you're subscribed. I believe it's in the bottom right corner, depending on where you're watching. And you'll be able to check that out when it happens. I also have a few announcements for you guys today. One, we wanted to shout out HICS again. HICS is the conference that we officially deem the FDN conference of each year. So our goal is to do one conference that we sponsor on the West Coast, one on the East Coast, and one in kind of the center part of America, which, just so you know, always means Austin or Dallas, Texas. It is never anywhere else, but that's what we call the center of America. So we try to do that on each part of the country. And the West Coast one is always going to be HICS as long as that conference is running. And this is their second year. They're going strong. They are going to sell out of tickets. We've had that confirmed by the person who runs that, which is Jeremy Maleka. We are currently at over 60 FDNs and FDN staff members that are going to be in attendance there. And I have a very strong feeling we're going to finish out at just around 100. So you can go to HICS-live.com. So HICS, a little dash, live.com. And then for the code, you have to use, now it's summer 30. So all caps summer 30. It does give you 30% off still. That is good until the end of August, assuming that they still have tickets. Please remember that they will sell out. This is not a gimmick. Jeremy let me know, actually, they are at double the ticket sales they were at the same time last year. So it's not if they're going to sell out, it is when. I'm sorry, I don't have an answer on when. We can't predict that, but I do not want you guys waiting until the last weekend in September or something. I cannot imagine that's going to work then. So that is HICS, and check it out. We'd love to see you guys October 9th through 11th in San Diego, California. But now we're going to be interviewing someone on the opposite side of the country in New York. Her name is Michele, and here is her background. When autoimmune disease touched her family, it launched her mission to uncover the hidden triggers that keep people sick. As a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner herself and co-owner of the Well Center in Armonk, New York, she specializes in helping both adults and children with autoimmune conditions identify and address root causes, from mold exposure and Lyme disease, which is so important for those of us from the Northeast or living in the Northeast, to heavy metal toxicity and complex gut issues. Using targeted lab testing and supportive coaching, she guides clients through their healing journey, bringing both professional expertise and personal understanding as a mom of three to create practical solutions that work. Michele, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, Detective Ed.
We're very glad to have you.
Happy to be here.
I got to say this first. I normally start out with the same question, which we will, but your center's in a really cool place of the country. How far are you guys from the beginning of the Catskill Mountains in that area?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I was just in the Catskills. I'd say about 2 hours, somewhere from there.
Oh, gee, okay. So a little farther, but not too terrible. If you guys want to go somewhere to heal, go camping there. Grab a hotel there. That is like one of my favorite places in the entire country, let alone the Northeast. So got to check that out when you're hopefully visiting Michele at her center here. Anyway, shameless plug. So let's get into this today. And this is something that actually, from your information alone that was sent to me, I do not 100% know yet. I know that your family had a very powerful health journey, which we're going to talk about today. Did you specifically have health symptoms yourself?
Yes. When I was in college, I actually ended up in the hospital with colitis and IBS. So I had headaches. I had stomach issues kind of my whole like teenage years. Went to college, partied a lot, and ended up in the hospital my freshman year. I think they called my mom and said, come live with her in her dorm or else we're going to have to keep her in the hospital. Obviously that was without aging myself 30 years plus years ago.
Okay.
And, there wasn't this information out here yet. There wasn't functional medicine. Well, there was, but it wasn't, overtly known. It wasn't on social media everywhere. So I didn't know. They put me on medicine. I, lived in my dorm and healed. And so I had to really do the research to figure out what was going on. Fast forward 10, 15 years later. I mean, I struggled with this all my 20s into my 30s, having kids. After each meal, I would feel really crappy and, didn't know what to do. And then fast forward to what happened with my family. I started learning all about food as medicine, cutting out gluten, dairy, and lo and behold, going to sleep earlier, things like that, changing my lifestyle, technically dress as we do, without knowing it was dress yet, and started to feel better. I used to get sick every 3 weeks when I was in college in my 20s. Now I think I've gotten sick once in the past 2 years. So, really had to learn on my own through what happened with our family.
I have a particular respect for people who were dealing with these things, like you said, prior to the information being out there. And it's crazy in a real sense. If you and I walk down the street to 100 random people and said, what's a functional nutrition practitioner? What's functional medicine, right? I don't think the vast majority could still define this. And then to your point, you go 30 years back. I mean, it's not like, again, we don't even have these people out there on YouTube. YouTube's not a thing. Like, I just have an extra level of respect for people that were in this space, or even worse, fighting their own health journeys at the time where, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm guessing when you said do your own research, I'm guessing your best bet was what? Heading to the library and looking up natural health books, or how did you do it at the time?
I say research, but I don't even actually think I did research. I think I just dealt with it. It's like talking to people, trying to figure it out. And, there was nothing out there.
Jeez. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I've said this a million times on the show, moms on a mission make the best practitioners. You better watch out, because if someone in their family is hurt, like Mama Bird comes in and she will figure that out one way or another. So I know this is probably pretty serious and tough, but let's break this down. You had some stuff going on with your husband, had some stuff going on with your kids. So I feel like there's going to be a lot of detail here. Let's talk about what happened with them.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to take a breath because so I don't break down. But yeah, so my husband actually was diagnosed with Lyme, EBV, Epstein-Barr, about 10 years ago. He got hit with Lyme very hard. And as you mentioned earlier, it is pretty rampant in this area, neck of the woods in the Northeast. So he was hit, so I kind of worked with him and his doctors to figure out, okay, how do we get you healed naturally? We did lots of diets. We did the autoimmune protocol. We did ketosis. We did, ultimately, I think ketosis was what happened to really start to heal him. But, we did medicines, we did natural, we did supplements. So I started learning through him on how we can actually heal someone without just going to, a doctor who's just going to throw medicine at you. Listen, there is a place, and you will find out when we talk about the PANDAS, but there is a place for medicine. It's just, I think it's right? So we do both. Sometimes we have to. So ultimately, that's kind of what happened. He went gluten-free, he went dairy-free, and we learned, through all that you can really heal yourself. So it was about a 2-year journey. He started to get better. Then one of my sons got hit with PANDAS, which are you familiar with it?
I am, only because we've had Dr. Piper Gibson on a few times. Please take the time to define this. One, because I have something to learn, and two, I think the audience would like to know.
Absolutely. So PANDAS it's technically called pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorders associated with strep. It's also called PANS, which is not because of strep and some other viral infection. But basically what happened is your body just overnight, takes over. It's called brain on fire. So, your brain just really becomes inflamed. it's an abnormal response, an immune response where it attacks some cells, the basal ganglia in your brain, which controls your behavior, it controls your emotions, it controls your motor functions. And so, what happened to me, and especially what I hear from a lot of my clients, is that my kid just became, turned different personality overnight. Now this happened about 8-9 years ago. And so at that time, no one knew what PANDAS was. Then I did my research. Then there was the internet where I was like, okay, we're going to dig in. Luckily we had a doctor at the time who, was great and was able to kind of diagnose it. But, so and she was an integrative doctor at the time. So we had two different doctors, and through medicine and also, learning about then parasites, heavy metal toxicity. For him, that was the cause, not the root cause, but also just really what was inflaming his body. Because what happens with strep is that with PANDAS is that it doesn't just take anybody, right? You have to be primed in order for kind of this condition to occur. So your body, your gut, your immune system, your toxicity, there's definitely things that are compromised so that when strep comes in, that's just the icing on the cake. So he got hit with PANDAS. It took about 2 years. And, I went into mama bear mode, as you said, did my research, and I went to I remember actually I had just stayed up all night at a Cub Scout overnight at the aquarium. And I went straight to this PANDAS conference where I learned from a bunch of different, holistic practitioners. And I met, am I allowed to say doctors' names here?
Are we trashing them or?
No, not at all. She's
good. Then throw them out.
So Dr. Nancy O'Hara, who's very big in this area with PANDAS, and she, kind of took our case, and Vicki Kobliner, they were amazing and really kind of took the case on. And, I heard Dr. O'Hara speak at this conference. So I was like, I want her. And, throughout all the testing, that's really where I learned about functional testing. I'd become a little familiar with it with my husband, but then this really, I dug in and I started to learn all about it, and to really how to heal his whole body, And what I did learn is that there's always signs beforehand, right? It didn't just come out of nowhere. I mean, PANDAS technically did, but nervous system was off, gut was off since he was a baby, right? There's lots of things that were signs that there were some tics when they were younger that everyone just said, oh, just ignore them, they'll go away. So those were signs that his body's compromised. So now I've learned, and that's what I do is, look at these signs and say, okay, let's hit this before it gets worse. And so, so that kind of happened. And then 2020 COVID happened, and I actually came down with Lyme as well. I know. And so did my other son. And so, again, it's very common. And so we really just learned how to deal with it. At that point, I'm like, okay, I know what to do. I can go into action, herbs, protocols. I actually didn't have to go on medicine for that. And was able to detox myself completely, and my son as well. And so that's kind of that's how we ended up here. And so what happened was when he, got hit with PANDAS about 8 years ago, I had been sitting in the space. I was a graphic designer, web designer, very, accomplished for many years. And I kind of was sitting in the space that I really didn't want to do that anymore. So I kind of sat for 5 years knowing the universe was going to throw something at me. And then when I went through all this, I said, I got an email from IIN at the time, which was, integrative nutrition. And I was like, that's it. I'm going to become a health coach. I'm going to save the world because, I learned so much about food and supplements and holistic healing that I just need to to heal the world. So I went back to school. It was good. It, taught me something because I kind of knew a lot from what had gone on in our family. Got my master's in applied nutrition and coaching. And then I still, we opened up the Wealth Center. And then I still said, I need the science behind this. I know I can do the labs. I kept as a health coach, I kept sending people to functional medicine doctors that I knew just to get their labs done. I was like, listen, I think it's something going on here, but I can't test. So that's where FDN came in for me, and, changed my career, changed everything about the way I think about the world. And I really learned the science behind what I was doing and my thoughts process and the protocols. And I'm so forever grateful for that.
Wow. Oh my gosh. There's
Yeah.
so much to unpack here. And this is actually a real challenge for me as a host because I almost want to dissect all three of your stories. I know that I actually think it's very important too, from an audience perspective, to focus more on the pandas thing today. If I can, I have one more question about your husband. I just got to wonder this here. So relatively speaking, a couple years, even a couple days with Lyme sucks, but a couple years is actually fairly good compared to some of the stories I've heard on here. So correct me if I'm misunderstanding this. Was it that he had obvious symptoms from the get-go, and you guys live in an area where it's prevalent, so he got diagnosed quickly with Lyme, and then because of your interest and background that was already curious about this type of natural stuff through things that you had been through, that is why you were able to instantly kind of jump on this more natural route to help with the more long-term stuff? Is that accurate, or am I missing something?
A little bit, not really. So he actually was sick for about a year we didn't know what was going on.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Yeah. So, we had 3 kids under the age of, I think at the time he was 4. So we had 3 kids under the age of 4. My oldest did not sleep. I love you so much. He did not sleep. So I kept saying to my husband, I know you're exhausted. I'm getting woken up 4 times a night. I don't understand, why like you're tired and cranky and I can hold it together. So we were kind of like thinking it was that, just having 3 little munchkins. And, lo and behold, it just kept getting worse and worse. And so it took a few testing. We thought it was Epstein-Barr at first. And then eventually, my sister-in-law knew a great doctor out where in Armonk, which we didn't live up here yet.
Okay.
And so she was the one that was like, okay, we're going to figure out what this is and let's get tested for Lyme. And that's when we knew. So it had already been a year and a half that he was really miserable. But luckily the doctor that we found was an integrative doctor. So.
Okay, thanks. I'm glad I asked, because that's what I was just missing that there, because normally it would be something more like you said.
Yeah.
My best friend got Lyme at one point, and it's kind of a weird way to word it. He was almost luckier in the sense because everyone presents differently with the symptoms. Some really don't have any symptoms for a long time. He got bit, and we know it. He had gotten bit recently because he just started landscaping for my dad at the time. We were much younger. So within weeks of him starting that, there's ticks everywhere where we grew up and we're doing the landscaping. And like that county alone, over 25% of the deer ticks do carry Lyme. So, I mean, it's pretty much just a matter of time. If you and I walk through the grass 200 feet, you're getting a tick on you. So you have to like actually know that and be conscious enough to get it off, all that kind of stuff. Either way, his first symptom that he noticed was neck pain. Of course, you're not going to think that's Lyme necessarily. Second symptom was the Bell's palsy. So his face, for those that don't know, was already drooping, despite really no other symptoms other than neck pain. And so, of course, that's something that you go for, and they realize that that's abnormal. And it was easy enough to link to Lyme. So not everyone's story is like that, though. In fact, the majority don't seem to be that way. Makes a lot more sense now that I know there was a year before we even figured out what it was. Nonetheless, he's very lucky to have you and have your openness to these different sides of things, because I can only imagine what would have happened without that. So, okay, moving on a little bit here, just for the sake of time. I want to spend as much time as we can on the panda stuff. Deborah T, I normally would not throw audience questions in until about 30 minutes in, but I think this is a perfect one, so I will throw it in because you kind of stole it from me here. She said, what is the diagnostic criteria for that, meaning pandas? Is there testing, or is it a diagnosis of exclusion? And from my understanding, what's interesting is Western medicine does recognize this. It's just, one, probably pretty hard to get diagnosed with, and 2, how they view the manifestation of it is probably different than how we would view the manifestation of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think right now, more doctors are welcoming of it and understand the diagnosis. When I had it, no one had heard of it. And that was only 8-9 years ago when our family had it. So yes, there is something called a Cunningham panel, which is a blood test that does test the inflammation in your brain. There's like 5 or something markers that test the amount of inflammation. So that actually is the specific test for pandas, if there is one. But really it's a diagnosis of symptoms. So you have to have at least 2 of the symptoms. So sudden onset is a big one. Tics, neural regression, behavioral regression, night terrors, like going from being potty trained to, having accidents all the time. Tics, I said that. Yes. Anxiety, OCD, that's, that's a bunch of it. And, a lot of people have OCD, right? So you're not going to say that, but the sudden onset is a big clue.
Okay. I probably forgot this. Maybe she did say this before. The behavioral regression that caught my ear instantly, and then you gave an example, right? Being potty trained, and then all of a sudden not being able to do that. Wow. So, behavioral regression, I guess, could also look like maybe behaviors you'd expect out of a 2-year-old, 3-year-old tantrums, and then maybe they're doing it older. Is that correct too?
Uh, yes, exactly. So all of a sudden, it's like things that they've gotten past developmentally.
Yeah.
Things are starting to happen. You hear from school that all of a sudden he's regressed, and his behavior is different at school, or there's something called dysgraphia, which is where your handwriting all of a sudden becomes really messy and it hurts to write. And that happens. Your handwriting is great. They're writing, everything's fine. And all of a sudden you notice that their handwriting starts to become a little more messy. So things like that, where, they're not waking up in the middle of the night, anything that they had kind of gotten past developmentally.
Okay. With I'm asking you personally because I don't. If you have the stats offhand, that's great. But I hate putting people on the spot like that on the show. It's not really fair. I'm sure there are statistics, is what I'm getting at, about like the most common symptoms that manifest first with this. Just like we talked about with Lyme, not everyone has the same stuff at first. Just from your experience and the people that have probably reached out to you or that you've worked with, are there common signs that you would really start kind of raising the red flags if you started to see this in your kid? Because even anxiety or something that could start for a variety of reasons all of a sudden that, of course, are not necessarily this. So are there any things that when you hear, oh, these things specifically started, red flag?
Yes. I definitely think tics, people will have like minor tics, but these tics can be pretty severe where your whole body, or a vocal tic. So that definitely is one of the clues. Having intrusive thoughts. I do hear from a lot of my clients that like they're having intrusive thoughts about things, everything from the opposite sex to, losing a parent, or just being afraid. And, so like things that they become obsessive with in their thought process, I think is a big clue. Yes, anxiety it's hard to, a lot of people have anxiety for different reasons. We know that. But things where there's really like a fear that overtakes you all of a sudden.
Wow. Okay. Well, that is not fun at probably any age, let alone for a child. It's kind of weird always listening to this stuff, especially the panda stuff. I don't think I had that. That's not what I'm saying by any means. But this weird, as Reed would say, milieu of symptoms and stuff that I had, other than the tics, often resemble pretty closely, and the behavioral regression. I think I just wasn't making progression with my behavior. It wasn't so much a regression. A lot of the stuff I relate to a little too much, especially even in the intrusive thought sense. Like I kept this stuff very private when I was 5 or 6, but I remember I developed these like very strange habits, like, and we didn't even go to church, mind you, but blinking when we passed a church. Otherwise, I thought I was like going to die or something. But I never, this didn't seem even abnormal to me, which is strange. And I never told that to anyone, right? Like I kind of knew enough not to say that. And then I looked back and that actually stopped relatively early too, which is also interesting because I had plenty of symptoms later in life and it didn't include that. But you kind of think how many kids are dealing with something like that or something similar, but would never verbalize it or be ashamed or whatever it might be. So that's sad to know that so many of these kids that are dealing with this stuff are going through it. You listen to the show, so you can verify this. I never get into this topic. I am genuinely asking out of curiosity. I have no idea if this is the case, and I am not a PhD. I don't fully understand this stuff. With that said, I'm thinking about what you're talking about here, early or sudden onset, the heavy metals thing, whatever. Have you heard of people or kids having these reactions shortly after some type of scheduled vaccination, or am I off the mark here? I'm just genuinely curious.
No, I do have a few clients where that has been the case.
Okay.
Usually it's not out of nowhere. There is other symptoms. Their nervous system is off. Their immune system is off. They're getting sick a lot. There is something else. Whereas I don't believe that the vaccines itself immediately would do this. Again, I think with PANDAS, I think that you have that condition in your body. Your body is compromised. Yeah. So maybe the vaccine was the final straw that did put your body over the edge. But I think there's stuff underlying that kind of was leading up to that, usually in the case.
Well, thank you. That's a fair answer. And also, I want to get into this more in a sense on a show for a variety of reasons, not to pose an opinion. I don't have an opinion yet. I don't know. But, well, I guess I have an opinion, but it's one that I think would be favored by both sides. I think what we're seeing, because Michele, you know how this is, even forget the pandas thing for a second. There are so many parents that are adamant something happened to their kid afterwards. And then you get very well-meaning people that are involved in the science that are highly intelligent that says, no, we can't find any causal relationship here. And I'm like, well, what if both were true, but the perspective is off? What if it isn't causal? It's that you have to look at this like an FDN perspective where there's 5,000 different things hitting this kid. And if this is a final straw, well, guess what? The parents are telling the truth. And you are also correct, Mr. or Mrs. Scientist, that it is not causal. It was a contributing factor. So this metabolic chaos lens that we view things from at FDN, I think makes a lot of sense here. And you didn't even know I was going to ask that, or that's what I was thinking. But I think you kind of suggested that by saying, no, I don't believe that this was the only thing. These kids normally had other stuff going on. You actually even mentioned that in the beginning with the strep thing, right? Western medicine is locked into this philosophy that it's like one or two things that leads to this. Whereas FDNs, sometimes it could be one thing that contributes to something. Yes, my buddy was perfectly healthy. I'm positive he got Lyme disease, and we need.
Oh, I can't hear you. Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Can you hear
Oh,
me now?
there we go. There we go.
Oh, good. It said device restarted unexpectedly. I don't know what that means. Anyway, my whole point of it was I just want to keep an open-minded approach here because I believe so much of the stuff that we're seeing is a stack up of different stressors, and certain people's genetics will lead to them getting different diseases because of it. And vaccines, maybe no one's necessarily lying per se. No one's trying to out there doing something bad. Very few people wake up and decide that. Maybe what's happening is that is a major stressor. And when you have a million others in your body, it can trigger something, which is like, duh, how many people have long COVID that never got the vaccine? How many people do you know got the vaccine and all of a sudden they have chronic symptoms? So maybe it's the virus, the bacteria, the disease itself that triggers something, in addition to all the other things that they went through. So I apologize for going off on that, but I just want everyone that's listening right now, functional and Western, to keep a more open mind with this stuff and not to hate the other side and automatically assume that they're lying or being bad. I don't think parents wake up one day and make up that their kid is sick, generally speaking. And I don't think scientists wake up one day and says, I can't wait to manipulate the masses and trick all of them, generally speaking. So
yeah, I agree. And I do agree that, I do think whatever it is, whether it's PANDAS or, Lyme, yes, you get bit by a tick, but vaccines, I agree. I'm not, I don't want to say either way. I'm not a doctor as well, but, right. But I do agree that it's probably the tipping point when, if you think about a cup, like I say this a lot to clients, if you think about a cup that's almost at its boiling point, there's the immune system and metabolic chaos where things are just not fully aligned and balanced and your micronutrients are off or your gut is off, right? Something's going on. And then you put the vaccine or whatever it is, or strep or anything, it kind of overflows. And that's where I think you see the symptomology.
Sure. All right. So let's move on into what we can do about this and also just how we might focus on this differently. Because you know what? I think about the titles that we put out, Michele, and there is a chance, and actually probably a high one, that someone is going to be dealing with a kid who got diagnosed with this. They search it on YouTube, start doing research, like you said, and they don't even know that we're a natural health oriented show. They don't know what an FDN is or anything like that. So let's first differentiate the philosophies and then break down what we can actually do from a holistic standpoint. So in terms of the philosophical differences, here's what I'm getting at. Western medicine, let's say you go there, the symptomology was met, they do the test, and they do diagnose your kid with PANDAS. Correct me if I'm not right here, but is their philosophy that this is something that you cannot do much about and that, hey, you're stuck, or do they actually do things about this and have medications for it?
Yeah, there's definitely medications for it. There's a bunch of them. Usually it goes after the strep, okay. You do need, and I do agree that that's why, obviously, as I said, I'm not a doctor. I do believe that with PANDAS, you do have to have a PANDAS literate doctor on staff as well, right? On your case, because I do think you do need some sort of antibiotics. In my case, I did it for about 2 to 3 months, and then I panicked and I was like, I'm not doing any more antibiotics. Some people, these kids are on it for years. So I do think you have to take that side of it. There's like a 3 to 4 pronged approach, where you do have to go, probably some medicine, things like Advil, ibuprofen, like that also helps sometimes when you're having a flare. So I do think there is a side for it, even though I'm the last person to give my kids Motrin, as they know, even when they have a headache, I'm like, deal with it. But so you have that side of it. Then you have to look at the underlying conditions, right? So that's where, and I do find so many of these kids have mold, they have Lyme, they have mycoplasma, they have, Epstein-Barr, herpes. I mean, it's crazy that a 4 or 5-year-old kid has herpes, right? Like, where is this coming from? But I find all of it, gut, heavy metals, toxins. And so that's obviously the FDN part of it, is looking really at the underlying condition, and the underlying issues.
Got it. So I'll move my line here. They do have things to do about it, which I did not understand. So thank you. They're doing the best that they can. Obviously, that should be a given. The philosophical line would get drawn probably in the sense of, do you think most PANDAS literate doctors would be focusing on gut infections, mold, and stuff like that? Or is that more us?
I think a great PANDAS literate doctor is focused on both.
Okay. Wow.
I do. I think there is definitely a place for that medicine. I really do, because again, you have to go for the infection. And I do think strep is one of those that you really have to go, and ever since this, and I've learned strep is the one thing I will give antibiotics for. Some people might not agree with me, but for me, that's the one thing. Anything else, we're going to deal with it naturally. But for strep, I do think you need it. So, I do think there is that line, but I do think doctors really need to understand both.
Okay. And then I promise my last question on this is just to understand it again. If someone's watching today and doesn't get where we stand or don't stand, is it fair to say that there are doctors that give out a diagnosis of PANDAS, but are not necessarily PANDAS literate in the way that you're talking about?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. So a lot of times your, primary care will say, okay, I think this is PANDAS, and you should go deal with it. Like, go find somebody that can really handle it. Some, I'm not speaking for all the, obviously there's the gamut. I think some people understand it more so now. I had a conversation with my doctor recently, my pediatrician, and she actually refers a lot of people out to me as well now at this point. But I said, why all of a sudden, like this year, I've gotten 15 new clients in the past 3 months. I mean, it's been, like it's really, like, I was looking up stats actually. And, in 2017, when we got this, there was like 1 in 13 cases, apparently. I think that's actually very low. So don't quote me on that, but that's what I read. But now there's so many cases, 13, 15 alone in the past few months. And my doctor believes that strep, the last round of strep, like last year and the year before, was so mild that it went undetected for a lot of people. So they would have like a stomach ache or, a little bit of a throat hurting, but like not so obvious to the point where they went and got tested for it. So there it is, strep ruminating in their body, and, ended up causing a lot more cases now.
Okay, got it. That's an interesting theory. I could buy that. I think also too, we've had Dr. Lori Rose on many times, and she's brought up this idea that, again, COVID and the treatment that was offered for COVID, if you'll call it a treatment, seemed to affect a lot. Both of them seem to affect a lot of people negatively, regardless of what they chose to do. And there are these like weird little illnesses going around now. People seem to be getting sick more often. So I'm not surprised that this would be something that's going up as well. So in terms of the hope then, because there is tons of hope from this functional nutrition and functional medicine standpoint, depending on who you're working with, where are some places that, let's say I come into your office, my kid has PANDAS. Where are you going to start? Are there places and labs that you're always going to use? Is it case by case? That's what I'd love to know next.
I mean, obviously, I do believe that everything should be case by case. So I'm not a one size fits all practitioner, but I do, obviously I look at the gut, I look at food sensitivities, I look at mold, heavy metals. I do look at Lyme usually. Obviously, Lyme testing, I think, is extremely expensive if you go for the real, the really PCR and the gold standard. So that's a little bit of a tough one sometimes for parents to swallow, because they're spending a lot of money on these kids' health. But those are the big ones. I do a micronutrient test as well, because, guaranteed these nutrients are definitely out of balance.
Of course, every case is going to be somewhat different. That's why we utilize the labs. If they weren't somewhat different, then we would just run the same protocols and everyone would be happy and healthy. That's not how it works. But with that said, just from like a conceptual standpoint, are there certain things that are almost always an issue in terms of like the gut test, for example? I'd have to imagine that these kids have tons of other bugs, compromised digestive function. This is my guess as someone who doesn't work with this population. Is that generally true? Like, are there things that you're usually almost always seeing in the gut sections
Absolutely. Yeah.
on the gut tests and food sensitivity, stuff like that?
Yes. I mean, definitely guts off dysbiosis. There's a lot, usually their digestive function is completely off, which obviously means then their micronutrients are off. So I do see that a lot. I see mold way more than that is normal. I think that, it's way more common, I think, than we realize. So I do see mold a lot. I see heavy metals a lot. I see a lot of it. I see Lyme a lot.
Mhm. With the mold thing in particular, is it that these kids
Can't.
are getting? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think it's that they can't detox it
So I
because
thought you were saying you couldn't hear me for a second.
no, sorry.
I was trying to wonder. I was trying to. Well, one, the huge dog was walking behind me, so that distracted me for a second. But two, I was kind of thinking, like, is it that they actually are dealing with it more, or they have the inability to deal with it compared to the average person, less of an ability to deal with it compared to the average person? Because I'm trying to even connect this, right? We talked about the strep thing and how we don't necessarily, even though that's part of the diagnosis here, it's not necessarily your belief that that's the only thing. There's other contributing factors. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, what is the contributing factors? Does it just come down to the universal contributing factor? Does it just come down to genetics? Are there other things that are consistently happening? Or like, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, as we know, right, it's not usually one thing that sparked it, right? But I do think a lot of the time these kids are compromised right out of the womb. I think our bodies are compromised. I think about myself and like the crap that I ate growing up, and sorry, mom. But I think that I thought, when I was pregnant with my first child, that chicken Parmesan was, a health food because there was chicken. I mean, that's what I believed.
I got you. Yeah.
Right. So I think that our wombs are already infected. I think, mercury is really hard to obviously detox. So I think there's things like that these kids are compromised from the beginning. I mean, we're seeing kids with PANDAS like as early as, I think my youngest client is 2. Right. So like they're compromised. Yeah.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head. And I've said this for a variety of childhood conditions, the quote unquote autism. And I'm not dismissing autism, by the way. I'm saying that I do think there are symptoms sometimes that manifest as things that look like autism that might not actually be it. That's a whole separate podcast. Anxiety, depression, behavioral issues, ADHD, sleep issues. We're seeing all this stuff happening in kids. And it is my belief as well that not only are they like unintentionally being poisoned from day one, but if there's weaker hosts or weaker donors, so people providing the sperm and people hosting the baby here, then you're going to set yourself up regardless of the genetics. So I agree with this, and it's overwhelming sometimes to think about, but thank God there are people out there like you that are working with these populations, because it's like, what is going to happen when my generation already, some of the babies that are coming out, like the friends that I know that have had kids, it is very upsetting, man. Like how often there's something wrong. And these are usually people that are a little more into this stuff than not. That's why I'm friends with them. But I'm like, what happens when that generation has a kid with what we're doing now? Like we have a lot of work to do. So I'd love to get into that kind of side of things. So parents that are dealing with this probably do feel like it's hopeless. They've maybe been through some of the Western medicine treatments. Maybe it helped, maybe it didn't, maybe it made it worse over time. Let's get real. What actually does this look like to work with someone like you? How long before you notice some improvement? Have you seen anyone turn around completely? I'd love to get into all that stuff.
Yeah. No, I mean, I do think that, parents, first of all, have to be open, right? And you have to understand when there's something going on. I do see a lot of parents that just don't want to admit it, that will come to me and there's kids like not thriving and stomach is off and ADHD. They just don't want to hear it. Right. So we live in this world where first birthday parties, we're shoving cake in our mouth. I mean, listen, I'm fully guilty of this. So, because I didn't know any better. Now and I still believe in moderation. My kids should have what they want to have, but not all the time. But these kids live on, goldfish and potato chips and Cheerio, Honey Nut Cheerio. Like this is the staple of their diets, chicken nuggets. And I think as parents, we're afraid to really push the boundaries on that and push the buttons and really say like, no, we're not doing this. I don't want my child to be the only kid at a birthday party eating, fruit or a healthier dessert versus eating the cake and the pizza and all of that stuff. Or, I don't want to have to send my kid into school with a separate type of dessert, which, listen, once your kid goes through something like this, a real condition, you have to, and you have no choice. But I think until something happens, where, and it's really what I believe is like how do you reach people and how do you reach parents before the condition happens? Before that, like, how do you open their eyes without showing them the glaring red on the tests? And that really is to be like, that's kind of like my life's work, is how to reach people. Because, and I know everyone at FDN, that is our goal in general, but, I think parents are very stuck on this.
And that's why, again, we're so glad that there's people out there like you, doing this. And you're kind of like, what could go wrong? Yeah, we know that the sperm actually holds heavy metals now. So dad's sperm had a bunch of that. Mom had a C-section, no breastfeeding. The kid's eating like this from day one. They were having some like synthetic soy-filled formula. And this is not a judgment towards anyone. All of us do this until we know better. Obviously, you're a highly intelligent person. You can just tell that from listening to you and the work that you're in. And I love your transparency. This is probably why one of the many reasons that you're probably successful with this, because you're very real. And I think people connect to that more. You're like, I've done this stuff too. I'm guilty as well. We just don't know until we see it. And this is something that's human nature that I think greatly affects all of us. We're not particularly amazing at long-term planning. And I think that hits us in a variety of different ways. And you have to think about it. If you were amazing at long-term planning, that would be almost detrimental to us from an evolutionary standpoint. Let's say it that way. If I decided when I first saw the fruit trees and I hadn't seen fruit trees in a while, you know what? I'll eat this in moderation. I might not gain the extra weight that I need for winter. If you decided to be in moderation with some things, we might not have as many people on this earth as we currently do. And not to mention saving money. If you saved, what Dave Ramsey always says this, right? If $3 a day from 20 to 60, you'd have at least $1 million plus, not counting your house. And people don't do that because we can't think long-term in that way. Health is the one, if you're going to think about any of them long-term, I'd highly recommend doing this one. The friends that I have, which I can count on one hand, that have been smart enough to adopt some of the things that you and I are talking about before any health issues came up, frankly, I'm almost jealous of them. And in like a joking, funny way, they live the best lives because since they were doing it in moderation before they got sick, they still look the healthiest. They feel the best. They can enjoy a lot of the modern stuff. Whereas, for a fact, for some of us, when we first get sick, we got to cut back on this stuff for a while before we can even talk about the idea of true moderation again. So bringing that up, though, how can parents, like, let's say they're not ready to work with you yet, only because they can't. That's fine. We still want to help them out. How can they even start to navigate a world that's against these kids, right? Maybe they want to do something perfectly in the house, but they go to a public school. Is there any ways that they can help the kid or make the kid understand? I don't know if you have any advanced coaching that I wouldn't be aware of, but I would just think it's got to be so hard because like maybe the kid feels like the parent's fighting against them by trying to restrict all this stuff. So do you have any tips for parents that are sending their kids off to public schools where they're completely against what we're talking about here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, it does start in the home. So the morals that, and what you bring into the home will translate a little bit. And they're kids. They're going to make their own decisions. I've raised 3 of them and they're like, they go through phases where they understand what I'm talking about. They make good choices and then they don't make good choices. So I think, you asked me actually before, have you seen the success of people fully healing? And it's the cases where they really do adopt like the food, changes and getting the supplements in and not, it's where they're a little bit, not sure. They don't want to push their kid too much. And, he's already limited because a lot of these kids are limited in what they eat and they don't want to push that. That's when I see the growth and, the real full healing, not fully there.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that it does take a little bit of like pushing on our side. I think it all starts with the home. As I said, what you bring into the house is what I think that should be what your morals are. So, in our house, yes, we have some stuff, but in general, like, I'm fine with my kids saying we have the worst snacks, but it's okay because you're going to have it outside. You're going to have that. But in the home where it's 80, the 80-20 rule, as much as possible, we want you to be as healthy as possible. So, and I've really just instilled eating for health versus eating for weight or eating for anything like that. And I think it helps when the kids don't feel fully themselves. So if you can tie it to something they're experiencing, oh, you're not sleeping at night. Okay, well, if you have this food, it will make you feel, you might be able to sleep through the night because your body won't be digesting, it as the stuff as well, or whatever that is. But I think starting and living, being as much as possible. The younger you are, the younger the kids are, the easier it is to make these changes. I do think that, like, before the age of 5, especially, like, you can control it. You control what they eat even on play dates. You send with their own food. I think you model it, right? So telling your kids to eat healthy and you not modeling it, that's really important. But really creating that healthy lifestyle from the beginning, I think is really important.
Thank you so much for recognizing the importance of, like, the parents actually getting on board with this. And you know what, guys? I know everyone out there that's watching loves their kids. You wouldn't be spending the time to be 45 minutes into this podcast if you didn't. So sometimes you have to love them enough to make changes for yourself, right? And it's going to benefit you too. So that's the great part. But kids are sponges, and every kid, of course, by the time they're 18, yes, you do make your own choices. My sister and I were raised in the same home. We made dramatically different choices. Mine, unfortunately, a lot poorer. I can't blame that on my parents because we were raised in the same household. So it can't be that simple. But I've had a million cousins that I've got to watch grow up over the last, couple of decades here. And you know what I do find universal is there is a period of time, like you said, I would have said probably around 6 or 7, so close enough with the 5 years old thing. They're just doing everything mom and dad do. If mom and dad watch TV all the time, they want to watch TV all the time. If they're playing board games, they want to do that. If they're reading, they want to do that. If they golf, they want to do that. I think that's biological. It makes sense that our kids would be wired to copy us. So we have to be those leaders for them and say, hey, we're going to give this an honest shot. And figure it out. And I also have to commend what you said about kids actually being quite receptive if you do show them, hey, this equals this consequence. I have found that totally true in the mental health speaking. I don't talk at them. I just let them know, hey, here are some options. And if you're tired of dealing with crippling depression all the time, this is some of the stuff that I've did. Test it out for yourself. Do it for a week or two. See what happens, and see if you don't get better, or at least feel somewhat better, excuse me. So let's say someone, hypothetically, were to do this perfectly, right? They're under 5, so they control what the kid's eating. They do all the tests, no arguments there, whatever. Realistically speaking, Michele, like, how long does it take for someone to get back to a place where they're feeling comfortable? Is it several months? Is it a couple years with these kids?
I think it's somewhere in between that. I do think it's probably at least 6 months, at least, 6 months to a year, sometimes longer. Sometimes I see big changes right away just by adding some supplements, just by doing a little bit of detox, changing their diet. I think that, like, sometimes we'll see a big jump very quickly, not always. But as we know, like, it takes at least 6 months to get rid of, to start to, like, clear mold out and some toxins. It really does take a long time, to do, if you're even as an adult, if you're doing everything right, you're going to the saunas, you're doing, your detox baths, you're taking the supplements, eating the right food, it still can take up to 6 months. So I think we have to have realistic expectations as parents and as that practitioner that it's not going to happen overnight. But I do see a lot of small changes. Oh, wait, they did this. They slept through the night. They, mommy, my intrusive thoughts are not here, or whatever. So I do see that there is a gamut.
We're going to go over just a few minutes. And you know what? This has happened the last 3 or 4 podcasts. So either we've had the best guests in the world, which is quite possible, or the problem is me. I think it's a little bit of both. So forgive me because we are going to go a little bit over, but I have to ask you this one. This one's too important. We're not expecting perfection. I don't actually know what it would be right now, but just for the audience to understand. So you said about 8 or 9 years ago, for your kid to get diagnosed, you're fully into this. You can't control a kid fully though either. So I'd love to know, where is he at now?
He's doing fantastic, actually. Just got committed for football. He's going to be playing football for college in a year. So he's, and I do tell a lot of clients that because this is where the tears might come, but we've done the work, and it's not a straight journey, as we know, right? With all healing, it's a roller coaster, and there's blips and there's ups and downs, and they're doing great, and then they have a flare, and then you shift things, and but yeah, he's doing great. He's an incredible 17-year-old kid, and I couldn't be happier.
And this is awesome. So I need people to understand this that are like, well, wait, oh, she didn't have my kid, though. It wasn't the same. So this kid, now 17, just committed to college football, which, yeah, there's no one that wants to do that, right? Of course, every guy wants to do that. It's highly competitive. It's not an easy thing to be able to do. When his symptoms were the worst, what did a day look like? Just so they can understand where you guys were at one point.
Yeah. I kind of likened it to pure hell. It really is. Like, it was about 2 years of just, feeling very alone, feeling very, especially because I didn't know anyone that really had it, feeling like I had to justify what was happening, trying to get more information. And again, the rages, right? A lot of emotions. And it also, it's the ripple effect in your family. So one thing happens in one person, and everybody in the family feels it. So we were all off. I mean, the fact is, our family is thriving now. They're all doing incredible. But it wasn't easy to get there. It really was. It felt scary and alone. And I wished I had a community to kind of collaborate with at the time.
Yeah.
Which brings me to my what I've now created, but we can get into that.
Well, and that's exactly what's next. I was just going to say that that's beautiful, and I've experienced the same thing with my family. I ended up living with them as an adult for over a year, and it was kind of an unwritten thing or unsaid thing, and then we finally just acknowledged it. We were so used to a period of time, both through my own health issues, my mom's. There's a lot of stuff going on, right? But like you said, one person in the family, it creates this ripple effect. And that you weren't saying that as a place of blame. It's just a reality. One person can't be off in this tight family unit without the other parts being off as well. And I think part of the reason that I lived there for a year, yes, I saved on rent, no doubt. But it was just nice. You're in a family. Oh, there's no yelling anymore. We're not yelling. It's hi, good morning. It's fun. We go out to dinner. It's like, oh, this is how this is supposed to feel most of the time. And what that does for your nervous system and your brain, I don't have studies on that. I promise you that rewired something in a positive way. So this is amazing to hear. And then let's move into this side. So where they can find you, you can probably shout out within this, or we can shout it out directly afterwards. But what I wanted to ask you, in addition to your own kid, is if you have any amazing case studies or clients that come up off the top of your head, I would love to hear their transformation, because they might say, well, it's Michele's kid, though. Beautiful story, amazing, but she is the one that lives with them. Of course, that's why they got to figure this out. It's like, nope, not the case. It's possible for you too. So what's a really cool story that you have from the clients that you've worked with to the degree that you're able to share?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I do have a client who, believed that there was mold in the house, but it was coming up negative. And then she just pushed, and somehow found it in an area that was kind of hidden. And, I got a text from her recently and just been like, he's doing great. Yes, there are some flares right here and there. As you get sick, you have a little bit of a flare. So, but he's doing incredible. And it's only been about 5 months. So yeah, I mean, I have, a bunch of stories where I just check in. I'm like, okay, I haven't spoken to you in a while. How's everything going? And he's doing great. He.
I got to throw out this comment here. And by the way, for those of you that are watching live right now, remember, our guests can't see you. So if you could drop a thank you, or maybe you needed this today as well, please let us know, because it means the world to them. Deborah just said, so glad I caught this. Definitely got a new follower. You are doing great work. Thanks for sharing your story and your passion. Thank you for letting her know that, Deborah. Again, that's the best thing ever if you're on here live, pouring your heart out. And people are resonating with this. So for those that want to work with you, they clicked on this today because their kid's diagnosed, what the heck do we do? And then they listen and this is my woman. She's actually been through this. What can they do with you? What do you offer? You have both the in-person and online side. So feel free to break that down as much as you need.
Absolutely. So, I do have the Well Center, which is in Armonk. It's in Westchester, New York. But I do work virtually as well. So I do, it doesn't matter. There's no limitations. Actually, I am launching a new program called Thriving Together. And it's for parents, because I do find a lot of, parents are really economically strapped that are dealing with this because they've seen doctor after doctor and just don't know where to go. And so I've created a group where we can all support each other. So that starts actually in September, right after Labor Day. And it's called Thriving Together, and it's at thewellcenter.com/thriving. That's where you can find it. And, I just think I also include a one-on-one, labs would be extra, but we can definitely get to the root cause and have that community for each other so that you don't feel alone like I did.
And so just to be clear, we have a large audience, international and national. You do not need to be in person with you ever to work with you.
No.
Okay, awesome. Just a nice bonus if you want. All right. So, and then can we, Tracy, I didn't see the links pop up yet. Oh, Tracy got disconnected somehow. That's why I hope she's okay. Normally these beautiful links pop up when the person says it. I was kind of like, where's my Tracy? So we have thewellcenter.com. You can check out that right there. Please visit that website. And then for the Instagram, we have the Well Center at the Well Center NY, and you can check us out there as well. Awesome. So I'm going to reframe my last question a little bit. Don't worry, it's not a trick. I normally ask, what is the one thing that you would get people to do for their health? I have no idea why I feel inclined to do this today a little bit differently, even though I normally always ask it generally. I would like to ask specifically for the kids out there, not that they're listening, but with PANDAS and what the parents can do. So if you could wave a magic wand and you could get all of our viewers and listeners who have kids who are dealing with this stuff to do just one thing, so they never get to work with you. Maybe they forget this podcast, but all they remember is this. What is the one thing or change that you would recommend to them if they're struggling with this?
That's a very good question. I do think that, really the way I was thinking about this question is, listen to the whisper. Listen before it becomes a scream. So if there is anything off about your child, whether it's ADHD, just a little tick that everyone says, just talk to your, it'll go away, ignore it. Like what happened to me. Just really don't take that for an answer. And you have to empower yourself as a parent to be your child's advocate, because they're not going to be their own advocate. So, really just keep digging. Don't take like anything at face value, because everything, as we know, symptoms are a clue to what's going on underneath. So yeah.
Thanks, Michele. Guys, if we could get a final thank you in the chat, we'd really appreciate it. If you want to work with Michele, if you know someone who's dealing with this, I feel like this is a link I'd recommend saving, just because you never know when you're going to be at a family party or some event and you realize someone's kid has this. So the wellcenter.com, check them out there or follow them on Instagram. And then I always shout this out at the end as well. If you're maybe in the next phase where you're like, amazing story, but I'm looking to be like Michele when I grow up, you can always consider becoming a practitioner. That's not the typical route we'd recommend from day one. If someone is actively dealing with this stuff, definitely work with a practitioner in that case. But if you're looking to become one of us when you grow up, you can always go to fdntraining.com/call. We'd love to talk with you and figure out what your best route is. Maybe we actually are able to kind of get you in the right direction with a practitioner if becoming one right now is not in it for you, depending on what your family's dealing with. So Michele, on behalf of FDN, thank you. And seriously, on behalf of people like me, thank you, because even though this is not the exact symptoms I dealt with, I get that. For what our family went through with all my mystery stuff, you have two parents that care, that wanted to do the right thing and just had no idea where to go. I know that this has to be probably some of the hardest clientele to work with, but at the same time, it's got to be the most damn rewarding when you're on the other side and you get